like how co-parenting drama, and unsurprisingly there was a lot there. It's like the holidays just seems to bring up so many opportunities for co-parenting difficulties.
Yeah, totally.
And sometimes people are having, it's just interesting to see everybody's perspective in there. Some people were experiencing things for the first time. So that was new. And some people were having a hard time getting their kids back. It was just like, and then some people were like, I was alone for the first holiday, which was different. Like there's just so many differences around going through the holidays when you're in a newish co-parenting situation. Hi, Julie.
Hi, is this audio any better?
It's still a little echoey, but I think it's fine.
It's better.
Oh, great.
If not, I can just try the computer audio.
Okay. All right. No problem at all. So we are live in our Facebook group and on TikTok, and just chatting about our holiday and how much feedback we got in our question in our Facebook group about, how was your holiday, and did you experience any drama? And there was unsurprisingly a whole lot of drama.
Well, that's too bad.
It is too bad. It is too bad. Yeah. Not surprising. It's new for a lot of people, and it's a huge change, and it's just new. So yeah, we have 28 comments on how did your holiday go? Any co-parenting wins? Mostly I did not get a lot of co-parenting wins in that out of that question, but some people did. We've got parents who are sharing their kiddo between Phoenix and Tucson, and they're on their 4th year and they're just hitting a stride. And I think that being able to just stick with it and be as flexible as possible and as positive as possible will lead to that kind of like, okay, we can hit our stride.
I'm wondering if the people who had problems, if they have parenting plans or not. Because usually if you follow the plan, it goes pretty well.
Mm-hmm. What I saw in here was that there were problems with the parenting plans, which happens. Like people will not interpret it the same way, or refuse to follow a certain part of the parenting plan, like a pickup or a drop off. And then people are left, especially if it's a new parenting plan and you're new to parenting within this parenting plan, they're left wondering, what do I do now? So, my ex was supposed to drop off the baby to me at 3 o'clock. He's not here at our meeting spot. What do I do?
Yeah. What do they do?
Yeah. Obviously, if you have some sort of texting or phone contact, you'd reach out and see what's going on. Is it just a traffic delay or something more serious? And hopefully you can get a resolution that way, and it can go all the way to the extreme of getting the police involved if you've got a court order and they're violating the order.
Yeah. And my tip would be, if you can, like my top tip would be, even if they've violated the parenting plan, try to stay calm and try to solve whatever your problem is at that moment. So if your problem at that moment is, I don't have my baby, he's not at the pickup spot or the drop-off spot, I would probably make the phone call immediately and then be willing to just drive to his house and go get the baby or whatever. Like, so my first instinct would not be, oh my gosh, they're not following the plan. What do I do? How do I get them to follow plan? It would be, how can I, holidays are messy. They're chaotic. The timing of things shifts, right? You thought you were going to have dinner at this time and now you're not. Like, just how can you be as flexible and give them the benefit of the doubt, which I know is like so hard when you're in the middle of a court case. How do you give somebody the benefit of the doubt when they never give you the benefit of the doubt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? But if you can do that and try to be helpful, I think it does make a difference long-term in that parenting relationship.
Yeah, it's a really hard topic to give like a general answer to, because it's so specific between each co-parent and the history and what's going on now and what does your paper say, or do you have papers? And so
Right.
it's a tough thing to just talk about in general.
It is.
But, with any conflict that arises, if you can use it as a means to improve, sometimes that's the best you can do. So, oh, I see now there's this discrepancy in our parenting plan. All right, well, let's start figuring out how to resolve this now so we don't have the same problem next Christmas. Or something along those lines, or kind of seeing like, oh, okay, I see how this is going to be between us, and taking that information and, using it in whatever constructive way that you can. And of course, along the way, trying to make sure your kiddos have the best experience possible, despite whatever's going on between the parents, because it is their holiday, and
Right.
you don't want some horrible memory for them around Christmas. Or if you're really mad, you don't want to ruin your time with the kids because you're mad about something that happened with the co-parents. So there's some really big boundaries that often need to be put up, even in the face of drama or stress or upsetting situations.
I totally agree. And it is like, I think your co-parenting relationship is going to be probably as unique as your marital or non-marital relationship. Like, you guys have a unique dynamic and unique children. And we're, as parents, we're all just responding to, one another's strengths as co-parents and each of our kids' individual needs. So just the ability to kind of be fluid. And I've said this before, I think it's a lot easier when you have co-parented in the same household. I think it is so, so hard for those parents who have babies but are not together. And so they've never, ever had the conversations together of how do we want to address this particular issue. I think it's much easier for somebody like me who was divorced after 15 years, because I kind of know what my ex-husband's instincts are. I know what his strengths and weaknesses are. I know how he responds to each of our children. And I can then use that and kind of give him the benefit of the doubt and try to meet him halfway. But if you have safety concerns, or if you don't have any faith in your co-parent's abilities, that I think has got to be one of the hardest situations.
Definitely. It is really tough when you don't have good communication, when you don't have any trust. And also, if you get to this place in your relationship where there's like battlegrounds, that have been drawn, and each side is really like fighting on everything, like, you really don't want to get to that place if you can avoid it, because then it really taints your whole parenting experience. Like, let's take this to a much bigger place. Maybe you only have one child, this is your one parenting experience. And it can be really jaded if you have this horrible co-parent. And so I think a lot of the times you're going to have to really take this bigger picture and be like, what do I want here? And am I going to allow this upsetting situation to dominate me and my relationship with my kid for the next 10 years? Or am I going to reclaim, me as a parent? And like you said, Billy, be flexible and let some things roll off my back, and, maybe let go of perfection or how I think things have to be or should be. And move to a new place as a parent. Some of those traditions are going to change, and some of those things that you really want may not go that way. But as long as you have this great time with your kid, does it really matter? Do all those other things really matter?
We've got a question that I love, and I'm glad we're talking about it. And the question we've got here is it best for kids to alternate holidays every year or be exchanged in the middle of the holiday?
Is it best? I mean, who knows? It really depends on the family and the kids. How close do you live together? How disruptive are the exchanges? How important is it for the kids to see both parents at that time? So there's a lot that can go into it. Lately, I've been doing a lot of plans where the parents have agreed, look, I'm getting Christmas Eve every year, you get Christmas Day every year, and they're just keeping it consistent every year, which has been just naturally happening lately. But I kind of like that approach to give some really clear, this is what's happening every holiday and everybody knows it and we can plan accordingly. I know that, who has that Christmas morning time can be a reason to alternate, that can be important. But if you're flexible and, if your traditions are different, I know in my family, like Christmas Eve is really the big celebration. Christmas morning, kind of, maybe like as we got older, not really. So Christmas Eve was really important. Christmas Day, not so much. Other families, both days are important or different things. But as far as what's best, that's going to be a very case specific answer. Any thoughts, Billy?
Brianna, did you, I've got something here that says I have an answer. Did you
Yeah.
have an answer? Did you want to weigh in? Weigh in.
I as a kid, I would have loved to not be like handed off in the middle of the holiday. I would have loved to have been with one parent for the holiday and maybe next year with a different parent for that same holiday. So much better, so much more relaxing as a child to not be like making all the rounds in one day. Can be a lot.
Yeah, I mean, my personal perspective is the more continuous, uninterrupted parenting time that people can have, the higher the quality that parenting time. So in the beginning, in those early years, before anybody's gotten used to not being with each parent all the time, those early years, I think it might make sense to figure out how to both see a kid on Christmas or whatever. But I think longer term, the farther you get away from your divorce, the more everybody's comfortable with themselves in each environment, the better it is to give people large chunks of time. So that's just personally what I do and what I've experienced with my kids. And what I usually recommend is that people take winter break and cut it in half. Because if you have a Christmas Eve and Christmas rotation, nobody can ever go out of town for Christmas, ever. And like, that's just something you want to think about when you're building your parenting plan. This is a break that you have from school. It's a long, uninterrupted time. You don't have a ton of those options. Like, do you want to figure out a way to be able to build in breaks? And let's say maybe you want most years to be a mom has Christmas Eve, dad has Christmas, but then you want to build in the ability to have breaks sometimes. You could do that too. You could say, generally speaking, if we're both in town, here's what it's going to be. But if somebody wants to go out of town, they should let us know by this date. And if there's a conflict, then dad's dates have a priority in even years and mom dates have a priority in odd years. Like, I think parenting plans, you really want to try to forecast out to think about what's it look like if my family's blended. And the dates, the times that my partners has their kids and I have my kids might not be the same. Like, what do I do about that? And what do I think about when my kids are not, just now getting used to this going back and forth thing and they're very comfortable? What do I want my options to be? And I also really like to build in as much flexibility as possible into parenting plans, because I think life is unpredictable, or maybe I'm just not super rigid and I don't have traditions that I do every single year. So I like flexibility, but I think that, like you said, it all comes down to the particular family and their traditions and what they're comfortable with and who their children are and how to build something that works for this family.
Yeah, and not getting so tied to the actual days of the holidays. And I think you've talked about this before, Billy, where you don't change for the holidays. It's just you've got I think a week on, week off, and whoever day it falls on, that's how it goes. But that doesn't mean the other parent can't still celebrate with the kids on a different day. And of course, ahead of time what your week is going to be, and so you can plan for that. So I think there's also just letting go of things having to be a certain way on a certain day just because that's when everybody else does it. You can create your own fun tradition on a different day and
Absolutely. We've got a couple other questions. This one's a hard one. what do you do if you try to co-parent, but the other side's not being cooperative?
Again, more context would be helpful. Is this in terms of you have a parenting plan and they're not following it, or you just broke up and you're trying to figure out what to do, before you go to court, or maybe you're not ready to go to court just yet. So, you could approach this different ways depending on the situation. But, number one, I would kind of say, well, welcome to co-parenting. This is very common. You're not alone here. And the more specific plan you can have, the less need the less need there is to talk about co-parenting terms.
Okay, like, let's just say it again. I think what you said is so important. Can you say it one more time?
So if you're, for example, fighting over, well, when are you going to have parenting time, or you have just this really loose agreement where we'll figure it out each week, well, then, yeah, the other side can play a lot of games with you because there's just this loose verbal agreement between the two of you.
Mhm.
But that's one of the reasons why it can be really helpful to go to court, get terms put in writing. That's part of an order that can be enforced.
Mhm.
Because then you have a very strong position to say, look, let's just follow the plan. And if they
Right.
don't, you actually have enforcement remedies at your fingertips. So that's number one, is getting something in place that's helpful to really reduce the amount you need to communicate. I'll often have clients and they'll be like, oh, well, every other week and we'll figure it out. And I'm like, well, you can do that, but that means you are going to be texting and calling and all up in each other's business all the time to figure out these terms every single day or week or whatever. Do you really want to have that much? I mean, you're getting divorced or breaking up for a reason. Do you really want that much contact?
Right. How do you reduce the need for anyone to be cooperative? And then
Yeah.
what I really like is, like, if you can't agree, you fall back to your parenting plan. And if your parenting plan's detailed enough, it should have things for, like, okay, if we want to go out of town, here's how it works. Or you should have rules to fall back on so that you don't have to be cooperative. And the cooperative should come in only if both people agree to something. And they don't have to agree to something outside the parenting plan. So, and you, as the person who is looking for the change, need to understand that the parameters are those parents, is that parenting plan, if they don't agree.
Yeah, and then just realizing that, for the majority of co-parents, it is a rough road.
Yeah.
If you have this expectation that the other side's just going to agree with you and everything's going to be smooth, I don't see that very often. It does happen. But yeah, usually there are things that you disagree about, and, things that you need to resolve. And that's just kind of part of parenting, and in particular, co-parenting.
Yes. And if that can be especially difficult when one parent during the relationship took the majority of the responsibility of the children, and now they're losing a large part of what both parents agreed was going to be this parent's responsibility. But all of that goes out the window when you break up. Now, this division of duties that you had, where maybe mom was tasked in the relationship with providing primary care, and dad was tasked in the relationship with providing primary financial support, that's gone. Now both parents have to provide financial support. Both parents have to provide the parenting, and it can be a big jarring shift.
It can be, and I encourage people to expand their point of view, because I often, it's usually the mom, let's just be honest, it's usually the mom who's doing all the dental appointments and the medical and the diet and, all of that. Like, mom is usually the point person in general. And then divorce, separation, whatever happens, and now dad is starting to take a more active role, and mom is starting to feel threatened by it, or sometimes feels like dad's being fake just while the divorce is going on or whatever, to try to look good for the judge. And that's where I encourage mom to take a different point of view, because things are changing. And do you want to put up a wall for dad participating, or do you want to try to bring him into the fold, whether or not you agree that his motivations are genuine? And honestly, if dad's motivations really aren't genuine, you usually just have to share the information and that'll be it. Because if dad doesn't really want to be an active player, then dad's not going to pursue it that much. You just be like, oh, we're going to the dentist on Tuesday, and you know, Johnny got a new prescription and this is how it goes. And like, if you just keep the communication going, you can probably maintain a lot of the control if that's your goal. But if you're going to be like, oh, well, he never cared before, so I'm not going to tell him now, you're probably going to have some problems.
Yeah. And I would also challenge you to change your perspective. Like, why do you want to be the one to go to the dentist every 6 months? Like, it's not that exciting. It's just not.
Yeah.
You know, like we as moms and women are better off when our partners step up during a relationship and after. So that should not be viewed by us as women as a loss. My soapbox. I think relationships would be healthier if moms and dads shared duties a little more. I think our children benefit from having two different parents that are both very involved, and they get, of course, they're going to get, you know, pros and cons from each parent, but that's just more people investing in their life. So that's just my personal philosophy. We have lots more questions. Can we talk about grandparents' rights and a 10-year-old child who does not want to visit their grandparents?
Another broad question.
It is broad. They're broad.
So, I mean, in general, if there's no order in place, then there's no requirement to make the kid go to grandma or grandpa's house. It's only if the grandparents have a parenting order, or not a visitation order, that you'd be required. Now, if you have a parenting plan in place, and let's say that these are your ex's parents, then during your ex's parenting time, they can have grandma and grandpa over, they can have the kids at grandma and grandpa's house, like they're allowed to do what they want to do during their time. But if these are your parents and it's during your time, you can say no. They may file a lawsuit. They may file what's called a petition for third-party rights. So, you know, that's a potential consequence. But yeah, that's my thoughts. It's kind of sad with those cases where the grandparents aren't, you know, a welcome part of the kids' lives. It's a sad situation.
It is. So the follow-up comment here is the ex is deceased. So let's take a minute and talk about grandparents' rights and take a step back. So grandparents don't have rights by virtue of being grandparents, which is kind of what Julie was saying. They only have actual parenting time, or it's not even parenting time, it's visitation. They have visitation rights if they have filed in court to establish those rights. Now, when the ex is deceased is one of those times when grandparents on the deceased parent's side is likely to get some visitation. The reason being, the court wants to maintain contact for the child with that parent's family and extended family. The court sees that as being important and valuable. So if you have a 10-year-old child who does not want to visit, I think it's time to talk about why, you know, get the details. Why doesn't this kiddo want to visit? Is it not the right time? Is it too much time? Is the travel difficult? Because as children get older, you know, maybe what you had worked really well when your child was between 2 and 8. And now that they're 10, they're in soccer every weekend and they have to miss that to go to their grandparents' house. That's a really good reason to go back to the court and ask to modify the grandparent visitation, because the visitation is supposed to be for the benefit of the child. And so not the benefit of the grandparents. So if what your current schedule isn't working for your child, then we would really want to figure out, well, what might work for your child is this a valuable relationship? How long has this been going on? If this is brand new, your child probably needs to continue and give it a minute and like feel it, like see if it's new, you're probably going to need to wait a minimum of a year of exercising the court's plan. If it's not new, it could be that you've just evolved beyond what that former plan is. So again, you're hearing so many what ifs because it's all about like your individual circumstance, but this is the type of thing to think about with these grandparents cases, which are hard.
They are hard, and the law does give a preference to the parents, what the parent wants as far as visitation between the grandparents and the child.
Absolutely.
So what I found is that if this goes to court, the courts are giving the grandparents some time, but it's not a lot. And if the court does give the parents a lot or the grandparents a lot, it gets appealed, and then the Court of Appeals says, oh no, this is too much.
Right.
So they could go to court and they'll get some time, but it's not going to be every other week. It's not going to be, you know, like a regular parents type of schedule. It's going to be a much more limited amount of time, and there may or may not be holiday time included.
Right. Right. Parents have far superior rights to grandparents as long as they're fit parents all the time. So that is, I think, a little helpful. All right. How soon after a father's petition for parenting time for a newborn will he see the baby?
Well, certainly mom has a say in that. Of course, you can wait until the court makes a decision, or you can start making proposals about what you would be comfortable with. You know, okay, Dad, why don't you come over for an hour on Saturday? You know, start getting to know the baby, start learning the baby's schedule, and you know, all of those things, and you know, maybe increase that time and see how it goes. Otherwise, you know, when do you have a hearing set? You know, what's the status of your case as far as when will a court make an order? I don't know. It depends on where your case is at, as far as what's pending, and if there's a temporary order or final order. But no contact at all, of course, can be justified. I don't know the situation, but no contact at all, if it's not justified, can also be dangerous in the court context. You know, if you want to go into court and say, well, Dad doesn't have any relationship with the baby, so he shouldn't see the baby. And then Dad's like, well, I don't, because I've sent you 20, 50 requests and you said no the whole time. The judge may end up giving Dad more time than you're comfortable with and at an accelerated pace than you're comfortable with. So if you're wanting a bit more control over the situation, then you might not want to wait for the judge to decide.
I couldn't agree more. I don't want that. I don't want to take those cases to court. If I'm representing mom or dad, I want to work out something for your family, your baby, look at your work schedules, and figure out what everybody can live with, because the stakes are just too high for me to go roll the dice, because newborns are, they're fragile. They're more fragile than older, sturdier children.
I think too, moms really need to be cognizant of this dynamic that can unfold, where if they put up too big of a wall between dad and baby, dad is going to get upset. And once dad gets access, he's going to be like, whatever, mom, I don't need to tell you anything. You didn't tell me anything. And you're going to create this dynamic where there's a major war between the co-parents. And the baby is a pawn in that war.
Totally.
So if you don't want to create that, then you need to start fostering a relationship where there's at least trust being, developed, and where, maybe you as a family, even though it's a broken family, can spend some time with the three of you, and you can teach dad how to work with a newborn. And I would be asking dad to be open to learning. Okay, because honestly, nobody knows as a new parent. We're all figuring it out. But as a mother, you do have certain chemical and instinctual and biological connections to the baby. So a mom can be a really good facilitator to help dad create that bond, which isn't quite as, I mean, it's still there, don't get me wrong, but it's not quite as natural without the breastfeeding and, you know, things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's kind of exactly what I mean by the stakes are too high. When you are filing a lawsuit, when you're in family court, it's like, it's not good for your relationship. Let's be clear. It is not good for your co-parenting relationship to have to go to court. It is so much better if you can sit down at a parenting conference or with a mediator or with two lawyers and talk about your children and their needs and develop a plan for them. 10 times out of 10, that is better.
You know, Billy, that's so true. Going to trial, be it on a temporary order or on final orders, I often call it the politics of personal destruction. Because you're not going in there and being like, you know, she's a really great mom or he's a really great dad. You're picking each other apart to try to show the judge, you know, oh, well, you should rule in my favor because the other side's terrible because of XYZ. And, you know, that's what you're doing back and forth. And like you said, that does not foster a healthy relationship. So
And
people
then,
think that going to court is just the answer, but in this context, often it's not.
right. Because what Julie was saying, where let's say dad doesn't tell you, mom, what's going on with the baby during dad's parenting time, that is dangerous. Your baby can't talk. Your baby could be sick, and you need to know how long they're sick so you can decide whether or not you need to go to the hospital, because babies are fragile. They can die. They can get viruses. It's just higher stakes parenting when you've got a kiddo who's under 1 or under 2. And so, yeah, those cases, I just don't want to take to court. I want to sit down and figure out what everybody can live with. And usually there is something everybody can live with, because parenting newborns isn't easy for dads. I don't know any dad, realistically, I know no dads who are like, give me the baby more when two people live in the same house, right? I've been around a lot of families that have babies. Have you ever in any environment seen an environment where dad is the primary caretaker of a baby when mom and dad live in the same house? I guess sometimes if mom goes to work and dad's the stay-at-home dad.
I mean, I know a lot of very active dads, and Billy, I'm sure you do too, but in those initial stages of newbornhood, I've heard so many dads say, oh man, that was such a tough time because the baby doesn't want me. And, you know, and I'm trying my best to just make sure everybody's comfortable. But, you know, I've even heard dads say, oh, it wasn't until the baby was 1 that I really even felt like a true connection and like I really could, you know, participate fully. And so, yeah, it's rough. And the other thing to think about too is, especially if you're trying to co-parent with a newborn, is you've got 18 plus years to go. Okay, so how do you want to start that off? Do you want to start with this foundation where you're hating each other and you're destroying each other and you're fighting over this child and you're mad? Or are you going to be like, look, I had a baby with somebody I really don't like in the long run, but we have this baby together. So let's figure this out.
Right. And I've got people here on TikTok saying that they had relationships where their husbands were incredibly involved. That's awesome. That's wonderful. That's what we should try to do. But you can't do that if what you're saying to the father is you can't do it. You don't know how, you're inept. The only way to get to the point where you have great dads who are equal parents and nurturing and loving is to work together to figure out together, what does this baby need and how do we as parents give it to the child? So I don't envy you. I think those are very, very, very hard cases. And I really wish you all, anybody who's dealing with that, just the best of luck. What do you do if the other parent refuses to sign or agree to a parenting plan? There's a stipulated agreement that says the parents will work together to develop a parenting plan, but the other person refuses.
Well, it sounds like you'll need to go to court or mediation. You need to get some sort of third party involved, it sounds like, to move things forward. And I would be looking at too, like, is there a particular reason why this person isn't signing? Are they just being a jerk? Or is it like, no, there's this term that I want to say something else. And you're like, well, you need to sign. And they're like, but no, I want, so what is the rub? Are they just not participating? Or is there some deeper, point of contention that really needs to be addressed in order to get the agreement signed?
Yes, and if you're entering into an agreement, a stipulated agreement, to me says that this was legal and this was filed, because that's the language you would use for an agreement that was legal, binding, and filed. It is not a good agreement to say the parents are going to work together to develop a parenting plan. I would really encourage you, if you're making any sort of stipulated agreement, to make it enforceable. That's not even enforceable. What does that even mean? Work together to develop a parenting plan. We need to say by when. What does that mean? By exchanging emails, by sitting down face to face, by a certain date. If we don't agree by a certain date, both of them will be submitted to the judge for the judge to choose, or here's what we agree on already, what in our stipulated plan, here's what we know we agree on, and here's what we're still working out. So just thinking, like, one of the things we do as lawyers and in doing contracts, and essentially a parenting plan is a contract, is always the what ifs. Just every single time when you're building your parenting plan or any agreement, ask yourself, but what if this doesn't work? Then what? And that's the next provision. And well, what if, so you really want to think about everything going wrong and nothing going smoothly, and then building it into the agreement. So sometimes the best we can do in an agreement is to build the procedure for moving forward. Let's say we don't agree on what our equal parenting time schedule is going to be, but we agree on equal parenting time. Then you could agree on a procedure that you're going to use to decide what schedule to implement, with dates and times, and that can really, really help. That really helps also with potential legal decision-making disputes. So if you're going to have a legal decision-making dispute on an issue like orthodontia or mental health treatment, or your child has behavioral health challenges or whatever, instead of just saying these parents have joint legal decision-making, I want to build in procedures for how disagreements are going to be handled, because if you have children who have any types of special needs, there very well could be disagreements. So we want our plan to offer enough guidance so that you're not stuck with just, well, I guess we go back to court. Do you ever do that?
Yeah, definitely. I know, the standard court forms have some language in them saying the parties go to mediation if they reach an impasse. So that's a potential option.
One of the things I saw in the Kim and Kanye West settlement that I'd never seen before is, so they have joint legal decision-making, joint custody, and equal parenting time, even though Kim is the primary parent. But one of the things it says is if they disagree on a legal decision, they'll go to mediation, and the party who doesn't show up at mediation, if one party doesn't show up at mediation, the other person can decide. I'd never heard that. I think it's brilliant. I think if you refuse, because that's what can sometimes happen, is you get ordered to go to mediation, one person is like, no, I'm not going, and then you're still stuck. But if you can build in that extra, and if they don't show up, then that is a great example of the and if it doesn't work, then. Okay, lots more questions. My husband and I separated 2.5 years ago. No minor children. He moved to Missouri. We're married and we lived in Arizona. My husband's ready to file. Is it better to file in Arizona or let him do all the work and file in Missouri?
I don't know what Missouri's laws are, so I have no idea if there's any sort of advantage or disadvantage under Missouri law. But that would be the analysis, is looking at, okay, am I looking for spousal maintenance? Am I looking for a 50-50 division of our marital property? This is what Arizona law says. You could consult with an attorney in, was it Missouri? And, explain your situation and see what you would be looking at there, and then decide. So it's funny, I was talking about this earlier with a client this morning. There's a tendency to be like, "Ugh, I'm not going to do anything. They should do all the work." And you can take that approach, but you're really giving away your power, because now you're like coming with your hand out. Okay, I'm waiting for you. And when are you going to do this? And when are you going to do that? And you need to do it now. And like, you're just, you don't have any power. And so, yes, maybe asserting your power requires you to quote unquote do more work, but you also have more say in what happens and how quickly it happens and what the terms are and what the offer is. You know, like, do you want to be in the driver's seat or do you want to be in the back seat of the pickup truck? Like, you know, so there can be this whole that, well, they need to do it. And I get that, but then you're going to be sitting around waiting and you're really going to be just very passive in the whole thing. So rather than looking at it as, well, he should do it, figure out which state is best for you. And then I would make a settlement proposal to him. Hey, I'm going to file in Arizona. This is what I'm proposing we do. There's a new procedure in Arizona. It's a new consent decree process where the filing fees are reduced. The process is expedited. And so if you can reach a full agreement before you even file, you can say to him, look, these are the costs. We're going to split this. These are the papers. And you can maybe do the legwork, but you could have all the costs equally divided between the two of you. So if you want to stay separated and married for another year or so, then I would put it in his lap. But if you want to get divorced, like in 2023, then if I were you, I'd take the lead.
Yep. What Julie just said is critical. Are you benefiting from being separated but still married? Do you have any incentive to get divorced as of a certain period of time? Do you have certain things that you want? Are you more likely to get those things in Missouri or Arizona? And then make your decision and make it on your terms. So you're not in the back of the truck. All right. The last, or no, not last, we have lots more. One, I really like this question. What do you do if you have 50-50 custody and then the other parent decides they want to move away?
This is just another challenging co-parenting situation that can unfold. If they want to move away, obviously one question is how far, because that makes a big difference. Is it plane ride? Or is it an hour in the car? Is it 2 to 3 hours in the car? You know, all of that makes a big difference. And, you know, ultimately, if the other side wants to go, generally they can go under some sort of terms. You know, I mean, life moves on. And if somebody, for example, has a really good job offer, or they get remarried and their life takes them somewhere else, making that completely stop may or may not be possible, depending on the situation. But obviously, it's going to create a change to your parenting plan. So if the other side's leaving, you know, what sort of parenting plan are you wanting under that scenario? And are you wanting to work that out? Are you wanting to get the court involved to slow things down? I mean, there's a lot of strategic decisions that can come into play depending on your situation. But you likely aren't able to completely stop it. It's just the parenting plan will change. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
It's much, much harder, I think. Long distance parenting, I think, is much, much harder on everybody. So if you're deciding whether or not to move, it's definitely something to consider. The dynamic is harder. We have the benefit of being able to look at family after family after family years after they go through a divorce as divorce attorneys, and see what works well and what doesn't, and then sort of come up with these general guidelines that I certainly have implemented with my own children and my own parenting plan when I went through divorce after being a divorce lawyer for a long, long, long time. And it's just that relocations are hard. Out of state parenting is hard. It can be done. And there's rules that will make that easier versus harder. taking, and I'm not clear from this question if they want to take the children with them to relocate or if they are leaving and they want to modify. So yeah, this is one of those things where you just got to go talk to a lawyer and take advantage of the fact that we've seen so many cases and can give you perspectives based on what we've seen. That I think is one of our most valuable perspectives, is just having seen so many different cases. All right, couple more questions here that are pretty important. Can I get full custody of my 2-year-old and my 1-year-old if the father has been charged with aggravated assault, domestic violence?
If the children are the victims of that crime, then you have a very strong case. If the children were not victims and weren't involved, you still have a good case, but not quite as strong because the court's always going to come back to the kids. I'd also want to know, the context of this charge, because that's going to play a part in the judge's decision. Is this a violent person who can't control themselves, or did this guy get drunk and fight with a cop while he was like blackout drunk? Not that that's justified, but that is aggravated assault. Is assaulting a police officer is an aggravated assault. I used to prosecute and do criminal defense, and sometimes people get really drunk and they do dumb stuff against them. So,
but this says aggravated assault DV.
Oh, DV, you're right.
DV
so.
is specifically there. So does that mean, as a prosecutor, can you tell us, does that mean that dad assaulted a family member? It doesn't have
there's
to
going
be
to be
mom,
a family
right?
relationship.
Any family relationship?
Right. I mean, it's defined under the statute, but it can even be between roommates. You don't have to have a sexual relationship or related by blood relationship. It can't even be roommates, can fit under that definition, but because it talks about having never lived together. Okay, so we are per domestic violence, and yeah, the judge is going to take that seriously. And when you talk about full custody, that means sole decision making and I guess all of the parenting time. You're in a pretty strong position on the sole decision making, I'd say, because there's the domestic violence statute, and so that's going to give you a strong sole decision making claim. And then for parenting time, I need to know more facts about, is the judge going to give him supervised parenting time? Is maybe his mom, can grandma step in and supervise? And, so there's going to be a lot of different factors to look at as far as what parenting time may or may not be.
Next question. Dad celebrates Hanukkah. We celebrate Christmas, but dad gets the child on Christmas. What can be done?
So either this was a plan that you agreed to or that was ordered by the court. It sounds like if this is just a loose plan that you have together, you could seek to get court orders with different terms. I would be making a proposal like, hey, let's do this next year. And then if dad's not going to agree, then you can possibly seek to modify. I want other things on the table for a modification than just this Christmas Hanukkah issue. You could possibly ask for mediation, see if the mediators can help you resolve this holiday scheduling conflict. It's significant, but like I said, if I'm going to file a petition, I want more than just that issue to take to the court.
I agree. Yeah, and a couple other things, like, has dad always been Jewish and still asked for Christmas? Because a lot of Jewish people will still celebrate Christmas.
That's true.
So there's just a lot of questions here to ask. Okay. What about if a party is charged with sexual assault against an older child?
I mean, what about it?
I
What
think
about it in terms of custody?
I think that goes, I think that is related to the, can I get full custody if they've been charged with aggravated assault? And then the next person is saying, what if someone is charged with sexual assault against an older child? What would that do for a custody case of, I mean, let's say let's pretend, because we don't know. Let's pretend that one parent sexually assaulted an older child of mom's, and now they have joint children together. How will the sexual assault of the non-biological child affect dad's ability to get parenting time with the joint children who are younger?
I mean, to me, that's a significant factor against dad. Even though the children are younger, I don't think that means that dad isn't a threat to them.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
judges want to err on the side of caution.
And
The
they
judge
should
doesn't want
this type of
to
issue.
enter an order and then have a child be sexually harmed. So yeah, these are strong facts to take to a court. A court isn't going to want a child to be harmed. And again, we need more information, but even though the child is older and these kids at issue are younger, I don't know if that makes a huge difference.
These are hard cases. These are very hard cases. We've had several cases where our clients were charged with statutory rape or inappropriate sexual crimes when they were 18. And now they might be something like 30 or 40. And depending on what has happened between 18 and 30 and 40, usually impacts the answer. If you were a child and made horrible decisions and went to jail and got therapy and have continued to do what you need to do to be an upstanding citizen, and you're a completely different person, then I've seen judges give those fathers parenting time. But if this was real, I've also seen cases where fathers lost all parenting time for soliciting sex with minors that were not even related to their children and lost all parenting time with their children. So really depends on the facts, the judge, what's going on. But it's a big deal. I hope that's what you're getting from us, is it's a big, big, big deal. And you really need to work out what your strategy is, what you're asking for, how it protects your children, and ensure that it does protect your children.
Yeah, definitely.
My 7-year-old daughter does not want to sleep over with her dad, and there's no court orders, and her dad wants to force it. Should I?
This is a really tough one. I've had this come up in a couple of cases, and again, if you can keep it out of court, best, most likely, because in my experience, the judges just order the overnights, so you're losing some control there. But what is the child's fear? Can there be some sort of progressive plan? She tries one night, see how it goes. Are there some sort of terms that can be put in place to make the daughter feel more comfortable and give it a try? It's tough, and if dad gets frustrated with mom's refusals or denying him, he may just go to court, and the court, given the daughter's age, unless there's some other factors that show it's not in the daughter's best interest, the court would probably just order the overnights. Yeah. Because dad's going to come in and say, oh, daughter tells me she wants to go. Mom's going to say, no, she's telling me she doesn't want to go. And dad's going to say, oh, she's begging to come.
Yeah, my general feeling on this, you have to talk to your child and make sure that they're safe. But if we're just talking preference, my general opinion is that children should never, ever be given the right or the responsibility of choosing where to spend their time. I think that you as a parent generally should I think you should never give your children the right or responsibility to choose where they go. I think it is your responsibility as a parent to protect your child, which might include not letting them go. But if you think, based on the information, that your child is going to be safe, then you and that other parent should decide and tell your child, because I think you free them from situations that they should not be put in. And I compare it to if you were intact if you were intact and your child said, I want to go live at the neighbor's house because they make better cookies and they're stay-at-home mom and you work, you would, right? You're smiling because that would be preposterous. I think it is equally preposterous once you're split up to now say to your child, you get to choose where to go.
Until what age?
It's a little bit of a controversial decision, or until what age? I think all the way, because I even have teenagers. Now, if my teenagers wanted to be at one house or the other, I would absolutely consider that. I would think about it. I would think about their situation. If the other parent and I talked about it and we thought it would be better for them to be in one house, I would do that, no problem. But would I ever say you get to choose? I don't think I would, because they're children. And it's not their choice. And you might have to come in and reverse their choice. And if you tell them, I've given you this choice, let's say that I let my 15-year-old choose to go live with his dad. And let's say this wouldn't happen, but let's say his grades plummeted. I would want to be able to say, no, we're going back to the plan, right? But if you've said it's your choice, I'm going to support you, honey, you've given away authority that you should never give to a 16-year-old. They should not decide where to live. Anyway, that's my soapbox on that. So I think that I also think I think it's bad for dad to say to the child, honey, you don't have to come if you're not comfortable. Like, figure out how to make your kid comfortable, invest in your relationship, figure out what's wrong. Why shouldn't they want to be with their dad? And you, dad, figure it out, like make the room nicer or spend time with her and stop watching TV or whatever. Like, I think, mom, you got to put that on dad and be like, how do we work together to make sure that our child is comfortable with both of her parents? So that's my suggestion. We've got only 4 minutes left before we head over to our private live within Win Without Law School. Win Without Law School has officially launched. We have completed our first special. We have a new special. Let's talk about that.
So Billy and I touch base, and we want to offer something just amazing to you guys. We know that you're struggling. We know that the court system is tough. We know co-parenting is tough, all of this stuff. And we also know that, it's tough financially right now for a lot of people. So for between now and January 31st at midnight, you can join Win Without Law School for an entire year for $297, a flat rate. You pay once, you'll have access the entire year. Most cases go for a year or so. So no matter where you're at, you're going to be able to pop in and pop out, get the information you need, and tap into the community. So we're really excited. We're hoping that this resonates and that, if you think about it, if you're going to go to a lawyer, you're going to spend $300 probably for that time with the lawyer, which is going to be about, an hour. So we're opening up, not that we're offering to be your lawyer, not at all, but we're offering up, legal information from lawyers for an entire year for what it would normally cost for an hour.
Pretty exciting stuff. And we will extend that offer to our current members as well if they prefer to convert over to the annual. Because it's going to take a year and we're going to be a community. It's going to be great. So for those of you who want to join, there's only a few days left before you could do the annual pricing of the $297, and you just go over to winwithoutlawschool.com. And for now, we've got to sign off and go hang out with those peeps. So have a wonderful day and a happy new year. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.